Hey guys, on today's Adobe Live episode, we've got Ben Marriott taking us through an After Effects tutorial on how to do a textured looping animation. So enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to this week's live stream episode. My name's Jeremy Lord. If you guys are logging into this, please say hello. We love to see where you guys are from. You can use your Adobe ID on the site to log in and ask some questions during the stream as well. That would be really awesome. So yeah, log in, say hi. This week we've got Ben Marriott, a super talented illustrator and animator as well, and you're going to take us through some tips in After Effects, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and today we're going to take one animation from start to finish and just delve into all the steps we need to, make it happen.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. So we've got a few people tuning in already. We've got Tushar Pandey saying hi, Ben. I believe that's a mate of yours.
Yes, Tushar. He's a big fan of mine. And James as well.
Awesome.
Great to have you on board.
And we've got Raj P from India. CC0 says hi, Ben, as well. Maybe somebody you know too. So yeah, awesome to see all the people logging in. Please, again, say hello, ask some questions.
Please, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, so let's get into it. So what have you got for us today?
All right, well, we're going to tackle this animation here. So I'm going to play it back, and this is what we're going to create from start to finish.
That's awesome.
We've got this little potion character swinging back and forth, and this is just a 2-second loop, and we're going to cover the main swinging animation, some secondary animation, which is the animation happening with the water, the liquid inside, and then the effects and shading on top of that as well. And if we get time, we should cover the sparkles and maybe the background changing color as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right, let's get stuck in.
Yeah.
All right, so here I've got our basic shapes already drawn up. Now I drew these straight in After Effects. So at the bottom we've got 4 layers here. At the bottom we've got a layer called Flask Circle, which is just this circle here that you can simply draw with the ellipse tool with all your shape tool needs all the way up here on the top left. Flask Top is a shape layer, and that's got 2 shapes in it. That's got a rectangle making up the main sort of pillar, sort of shaft of the flask, and a rounded rectangle at the top, which is creating that collar shape.
Right. Can I ask you real quick? So
yeah,
you're obviously sort of fluent in Photoshop and Illustrator as well. What are some of the advantages of working directly in After Effects, creating these shapes in After Effects rather than in Illustrator and then importing them?
Well, the main benefit is there's no importing process. Right. Really, like the tools are far more advanced in Illustrator for these types of things. Because they're relatively really simple shapes, I can just do this in After Effects. But for most of the time, I think it's better to do them in Illustrator, and then you can just simply import them with, file import or Command I and bring them in. There's not an awful lot of difference between the two.
Right.
All right, and then we've got a cork. So our cork layer, which is a nice trapezoid shape, and on the cork we have a mask layer. So if I press M on my keyboard, it's going to bring up the mask here, and you can see that's this green shape, which sort of cuts out part of the cork area, so we can see our collar underneath. Right. So I've just selected subtract from here, which will just sort of chop it out. Kind of like you can do something like a mask in Photoshop or Illustrator.
Yeah.
There.
So it's that old thing of you needed to be in front and behind at the same time, so you just put a mask on it.
Yeah, I'm just putting a mask on this, and that's a quick solve for this situation here.
Cool.
And then we've got our face, which is that's a composition, and that's just got circles and this mouth shape inside.
I love the little vampire teeth. It's a nice little touch.
Yeah, that's my thing to like. I like drawing simple faces, but then it just looks too cutesy and kawaii. I thought if I had vampire teeth, makes it a bit edgier.
Yep.
That's my reasoning. All right. So we want to swing our flask back and forth. I find it's really helpful to kind of gesture out the motion, before you start animating, just with your hands or with your body if you're doing a character.
Right.
And what that does is it allows you to maybe pick up on some subtler aspects of the animation that might not be intuitive when you first start. An example that was given to me that helped me understand it was if you would animate a head turning from side to side, you might instinctually just start with the head at this position and then just move it straight across to the position on the right. And you're like, that's how a head would turn. So you animate that, and then you think, why does my animation look so stiff and robotic? And then it was pointed out to me that, when you turn your head from side to side, you pretty much always dip in the middle, because as your neck muscles relax, it's easier to get your head to the middle shape just by relaxing your neck rather than straightening and peering out. So that's something that, you wouldn't, if you just went to start going animating and keyframing it, you wouldn't necessarily think of that. And it can be hard to troubleshoot afterwards to figure out where that was missing. So we want our animation to sort of start on one side with the main body of the flask and sort of swing and go whoosh, whoosh. And sound effects help as well. So many animation meetings. So should it swoosh or should it whoosh? So we want it to start animating, sort of like accelerate, go really fast at the bottom, and then decelerate at the top. So it goes whoosh.
Right, so it got a bit of weight to it.
Yeah, because you really want to feel the weight and make it feel sort of,
cool.
Not necessarily behaving exactly how physics would allow, but as close as possible that the style will allow, I think, or at least have some reason and rationale behind that.
Just while you're kind of getting started here, we've got Tushar also asking, do you use Overlord? I'm not sure what that is. I'm assuming you do.
Yes, I do. Yes, I use Overlord. Overlord is a plugin which is it's an awesome plugin. It simply allows you to push shapes from Illustrator to After Effects. So you can copy and paste from Illustrator to After Effects. I use that all the time. It's great. It's I think it's 40 American dollars. I think it's about 55 US dollars. Australian dollars. So I didn't mention that because I like to keep, make sure everyone can follow along without having to spend lots of money on plugins. But I recommend that if you're working a lot with shape layers.
But it's not necessarily required. You can do without it.
Yes, you can. It just simplifies that process. Instead of exporting file import, you can just copy and paste.
Yeah.
So it just helps streamline things a little bit. But I thoroughly recommend it.
Cool.
All right. So let's start with our swinging animation. So at the moment, we want to use this flask top area to swing. And we're going to use this layer to swing. And at the moment, we've got an anchor point centered here. Now you can change the position of the anchor point using this tool called the Pan Behind Anchor Point tool. And that determines where the shape is going to pivot from when we rotate. So that's where all the information is going to be, this is going to be the center of that information. So at the moment, and also at the moment, if we want to move this layer, we're only moving that layer and we want everything to stick to that layer. So this is where we parent to that layer. So I want to select all the other objects that I've got in my timeline down here and select the pick whip from the parent and link panel down here.
So that's that little
this little squiggle,
kind of spiral thing.
And you'll notice, and we're going to drag this line and drop it on top of Flask Top, and now everything is parented to Flask Top.
Right.
So now, if we move that layer, everything's going to move with it.
Okay, so they're kind of linked to that. Like whatever that layer does, everything else does as well.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Cool.
And also, I've got my composition now is 4 seconds, and we only need this animation to loop for 2 seconds. So what I'm going to do is 1 second in, I'm going to drag the start of our work area to 1 second in, and then at 3 seconds in, I'm going to drag it behind. So we've got this sort of 2 second window in here. And if we put the playhead back, it's just going to loop between those two areas. We're doing that because it's going to make the animation a lot easier to, how do I say this? This is going to make looping a lot easier. So not every element of the animation is going to start at 1 second here and end at 3 seconds. Yeah. Some of it might overlap and extend further beyond that 3 seconds and have to come back in at the beginning again. I'll explain that fully and it'll make more complete sense when we get to some of the overlapping secondary animations. But essentially it just leaves this extra canvas on either side that we can see and we can use elements from, even though that's not going to be rendered in the final asset.
I've no idea, but I'm sure that it'll be clear in a second.
Yeah, it's a bit like if you use Illustrator, you've got stuff outside the canvas that you occasionally grab and drag onto your main artboard.
Okay.
Kind of like that.
That makes more sense.
But with time. No? All right. So we're going to set up the first rotation. So we're going to press R on our keyboard, bring up rotation keyframe, and at the very start, we're going to set it to 45. And then we're going to, 45. I think I put 145. That's 46. Let's go to 45. And I'm going to click on the stopwatch. We're just going to create a keyframe there. And at 1 second in, or it's 2 seconds in our composition, we're just going to change that to minus 45. So it's swinging back the other way. And then we can copy this keyframe and paste it at the very end. So now we've got this looping animation. So if we play it back, There we go.
Yeah.
Now,
and so this is what you were talking about before, where it's like it's incredibly mechanical and just
yes,
very monotonous kind of movement.
yes. At the start, this is really like this is very stiff and very robotic, and that's because we don't have any of that acceleration and deceleration, which in motion animation we call easing, or occasionally it's called slow in and slow out, which means as an animation will approach a keyframe, it will decelerate and accelerate just to make the whole motion smoother and more natural.
Okay.
So to do that, we're going to select all our keyframes and we're going to press F9 to add easy easing. I'm going to press function F9 because I'm on a laptop and I don't have function keys. And now if we play it back, you can see it's just a little bit smoother. As it approaches these edges, it kind of just softens into it a little bit. But we want this animation to be way more dynamic. We want the easing to be way more intense. So to do that, I'm going to grab these and I'm going to go into the graph editor. So I'm going to select this, and this is going to bring up another way to visually represent our keyframes. So make sure we're in the speed graph. Let's go to the speed graph here. Let's zoom out. So this represents our keyframes, and the further from the baseline of 0 the graph is how fast the animation is going. Okay. So at the start, it's not very fast, and then as we creep along, it gets a bit faster down here, and then slows back up, and then gets faster again as it rotates through the other side. So if I select all of these, it's going to bring up some Bezier handles, and like you would in Illustrator or any other pen tool, which is going to drag these across here and select them again and drag these, and you'll see that it's making this curve a lot more intense. Right. So it's moving the animation as you're doing that as well. Yes. So now if we play it back, we've got a much more severe swing. I've moved my work area a touch. Let's drag that back. And let's make these even more intense. I'm going to try and line it up with this line as well, just so I can see that they're the same across both sides of the curve. So you said the further that white line is from 0, the faster the movement is, right? Yes. Yeah. Yes. So here we can see this curve goes down, like in this first block, it moves down like 3 degrees. Yeah. And then here in that next block, it moves down like 10 degrees. More, and then here a lot more. So if we play it back, it goes, and in that middle area is where it's moving. Yep. Very fast. All right. Now, like we said with that head exaggeration of that head example of turning your head, we've got the swinging animation, but I kind of feel like it needs to sort of dip a little bit further as well. We need to exaggerate that movement. And because I'm imagining there's sort of like a hand holding it at the tip of the flask and sort of swinging it like that. And if you're swinging it, the flask itself is swinging like a pendulum, but you might also be exaggerating with your hand and your wrist is moving, and there might be some movement from your elbow as well. Gotcha. So we're going to add a position animation as well to this. So we're going to press P on our keyboard to bring up our position keyframes. I'm going to keyframe at the very beginning, and I'm also going to keyframe one in the middle. And now I'm going to go back to the beginning, just so we know they are exactly centered. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm just going to nudge it with my arrow tool, with my arrow keys on my keyboard, and just nudge that twice over to the left. Over here, I'm going to nudge it twice over to the right, and then at the end, I'm going to paste that keyframe with Command C and Command V, and then just paste that at the end. Right. So at the moment, these are still linear keyframes. We haven't applied any easing, so they're just going to have this same, like there's no acceleration, it's going to be that constant speed. Yep. And it's going to look, again, a little bit stiff and strange. So we're going to do the same process that we did to the rotation keyframes. So we're going to ease them with F9. And then we're going to go back into the... Is there a menu in case this is kind of like, obviously shortcuts are the way to go, but where's the menu for easing? Yes, let's go. If you want, let's undo that. I believe you can go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, and Easy Ease. Okay. Yeah. And if you only want to Easy Ease or Easy Ease Out, like the beginning or end of the animation, those are the options too. Mm-hmm. And you can get lots of plugins that make easing quicker. I recommend Flow. Flow is really good. But the good old-fashioned graph editor is where the best easing happens. Right. Like if you learn to, understand the graph editor in here. Sorry, let me get back to the speed graph. It's very easy to get lost. Whoa, what am I doing? I've separated my values. All right. Okay, we're back. All right. And now we're just gonna drag these across again to make that similar curve that we had with our rotation. Yep. So now it should match a little better. There we are. And we're also going to add a bit of an arc to this position animation as well. Because if you see at the moment, if you follow this anchor point, Flask is moving just straight on the x-axis. It's just making a linear movement from left to right.
Yep.
And if you were swinging a Flask, there'd be a bit of variation.
Mm-hmm.
So to add a bit of an arc to that movement, I'm going to select the pen tool and select the Convert Vertex tool here, which you might notice looks very similar to the Convert Anchor Point tool in Illustrator.
Yep.
And that's going to do pretty much the same thing that it does there. It'll just add some sort of Bezier handles to your motion path here. So I'm going to just select these all one by one and just have them sort of swing down. They don't need to be exact. Oops, sometimes they snap back up.
Right. So you got like a path to the left and a path to the right, and you want those to kind of line up relatively.
Yeah, that's going to mean
Yeah.
it's more symmetrical, and it will help the animation, but it's not essential because swinging doesn't necessarily have to be exact.
Yep.
If you wanted it to be super precise, like that was important for maybe you're animating sort of some UI or UX stuff that it has to be exact. Yeah, you want to line them up. But for here, it's fine. All right. So now, if we look back, it looks just a little bit more natural, and it's not a lot. It's not obvious, but it's these sort of subtle things that help make a great animation in the end. I think. And this is that's the main animation done for this piece. So everything that we do now from here is sort of based on this. So we're going to do some secondary animation with the liquid, but it's important to nail down and make sure you're happy with the main animation first. Otherwise, if you want to make changes to that main animation later, you've got to redo lots of other stuff.
Right, okay. So this is kind of like the framework of your house, and now you can go and do the electrical and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's exactly a perfect metaphor. The client will always come back and have problems with everything, so be prepared for that. But as much as you can, nail down the foundation first.
So far this is like relatively basic stuff with just like a movement and a rotation, like position keyframes, and just easing.
Really, yeah. A lot of my animation that I do is really just using the basic tool. Like most of the great animation you'll see is like they're not using like some secret effects and stuff like that. It's mainly the simple basic effects just used to push to their their limits and used wisely, like in Photoshop and Illustrator. The best illustrators don't have. It's not that they have the better brushes. Like everyone has the same brushes and the same tools. You don't need to know every tool in After Effects to create something. Create something good.
Awesome.
All right. Now I think next up we're going to talk about animating our liquid. So I'm going to create a new liquid layer. Well, I'm going to create a new shape layer for the liquid. So first I'm going to just scrub along the timeline until we get a state where our flask is almost vertical. This won't matter too much. And I'm going to create a new shape layer by selecting the rectangle tool up here. I'm going to change its fill to gray for the moment so we can see it in action a little clearer. I'm going to draw it here. I might move it over to the center and have the anchor point. Excuse me. Move the anchor. Excuse me. Let's zoom in, get a better look at that anchor point, and drag that around sort of the middle of where the mass of that liquid would be. Cool. Now, we always want to make sure we label our layers. So I'm going to label this liquid front. And I'm calling that front because we're going to have a liquid back later on as well. I'm going to change the color of that. Let's change it to yellow for now. And I'm also going to move this down a layer stack here underneath the face so we can see our face.
We talk a lot actually with a lot of guests about sort of workflow and naming your layers and ordering stuff. Presumably you'd be working with other people who would be handling these files, so they need to make sense of that.
Yes, if you're working with other people, you 100% need to label your layers and make things as easy as possible for them. Yeah. Not only because it'll help the work get done quicker, and you'll be able to communicate faster with the other person, but they'll really like you. If you I find one of the biggest things that's helped me in my career is trying to make other people's job easier. So if you have an opportunity, even if you don't have to, you arrange something really neatly, and maybe pre-render some stuff, and maybe just organize it, and maybe do something ahead that'll make the editor's job easier. They'll go, oh wow, like you didn't need to do that. Thanks, you made this job easier, and then they'll want to work with you again. I find if you make another person's job easier, they'll never forget it.
Yeah. Tashar also asks, do you use ease copy?
I do use ease copy as well. Yes,
what is ease copy?
Ease copy is an amazing plugin. Ease copy is free as well, so that's great, and it's for copying the easing values of a keyframe and pasting them into another set. So similar how I ease that rotation, and then I went in with the graph editor and tweaked it. I did the same thing again with my position keyframes. If I was using ease copy, I can copy the easing values and just paste them on top.
Right.
And that keeps all the animation and the easing values of your animation consistent, which is excellent. So normally, if I was making this, at home with all my own tools, and I would be using ease copy a lot. It is very handy. Okay. Now, we've got our liquid here, and we want to make sure this is parented to Flask Top as well. So we're going to pick whip that and drop it on Flask Top.
Okay, so now that's going to take, presumably, yeah, cool. So it takes all the animation properties that you just created and just does it to that.
It just sticks it to it, and then it's going to do everything there. But then we can animate this layer on top of that as well, and it'll do its own things in reaction to that animation.
So does that gray shape now, does that have keyframes that you can edit, or is it just all like you'd have to edit it on that parent layer?
No, so this is no keyframes. It is just stuck to its parent. I imagine it like it's like a child holding the parent by its leg. Yeah. So parent can walk, and the baby's sort of dragging along beside it. It can do its own thing. If the parent stops moving, the child stops moving. But if the
friendly.
Well, exactly. But we're going to add some animation just to this shape layer. So the first thing we're going to need to do is isolate it to just inside the circle, inside the flask. So to do that, we're going to create a matte, which is very similar to how a mask would work in Illustrator and Photoshop. I'm going to do that by duplicating this flask circle layer, which is the main round shape here, which is the reason why I had it separated from Flask Top as well, is so I could easily create a matte. And we can use that as well, just so we always know there's a circle shape here that we can, use to manipulate and affect other objects.
Right, okay.
So I'm going to duplicate that. Cool.
So that's why you didn't join it with the neck of the flask.
That's right.
Okay, cool.
All right, so I'm going to enable that flask circle matte and color that purple. And I'm going to move that to the bottom of our stack, and I'm going to turn its visibility off because we don't need to see it. Also, another benefit of labeling your layers, even if you're not working with other people, you should label your layers for your own sanity. If you open up a project of your own from 2 years ago, you will hate yourself for not labeling them.
How many layers would you typically have on a project?
This one, I think
like
we
more
end
than
up
this?
with 10, 20 layers, but up to like hundreds.
Yeah,
hundreds.
okay.
I've had, ideally you pre-comp certain elements where you can, but sometimes, you can't always can. So
that's good. I like that. You can't always can.
You can't always can. So you just try to manage it, whatever seems obvious and intuitive, and sometimes you just got a lot of layers and got to deal with them. So having them colored and labeled works well, and it'll save you time. Even though you might think you've only got 12 layers, why are you naming them all? You know where they all are. But the time it takes to label a layer is like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And even just going through the animation, like being able to eyeball which layer it is from the color or from the name, that saves you time, like internally within the project, not just when you come back later or when you're sharing.
It's a little bit of extra work to save you heaps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So now we're going to use this flask circle as a matte for our liquid front. So to do that, we're going to use the effect set matte. So we're going to type over here, set matte. And that's applied that effect. Hang on, let me minimize this here. And so let's leave that. Let's go back. All right. So we're going to type in set matte and double click on that, and that's going to apply that layer, that effect to liquid front. Now at the top here, it says take matte from layer, and we're going to select flask circle matte. And as soon as we do that, we can see it's restricted to that circle shape. So if we were to nudge that circle shape, you can see it's sort of pushing where the visibility of that layer is. So it just takes the visibility information from this layer and applies it to the liquid layer. And now what we can do is we can change the scale of this matte to 90% and just make it a bit smaller so it stays centered in the middle here. And now we've got the illusion that, the glass on the outside has some width. All right. Now let's animate. Also, it looks as though, let's change the rotation of this liquid with the front a little bit so it just sort of lines up with that face. About 0.8 degrees. All right, there we go. Now we want to add some animation to that liquid as well. So we want, as the flask is going up, we want the liquid to react to that. It's going to do that same, it's going to move up, but it's going to move up even more so inside the bottle and come down. So if you would shake a bottle of water, if you brought a bottle of water up and stopped it, the liquid is still going to thrash around in there a little bit. So that's where we're going to add some secondary animation. And
So this is where your sound effects come in to like swoosh.
Yeah.
Like,
you're going to need lots of that. This is quite a violent liquid in this flask. So we're going to set a keyframe of the rotation here, and let's just amp it up a little bit. Let's say, 20. 20 is good. At 2 seconds here, we are going to go to -20. So this is sort of, it's doing the rotation that the flask is anyway, and this is an extra exaggerated rotation that's going on inside.
cool. Again, this is to like add momentum and weight to it.
Exactly, just make it sort of feel believable. And now we're going to go in and easy.
While you're doing that, we've got T-Gauge Q asks, is there any way to group layers without pre-comp?
No, not really.
Okay.
No. Pre-comping, like parenting them, is probably, like not really. That would be handy if there was, but it's no. You just parent them and they'll stick together, and you can hide layers if you want.
Simple answer.
Yep.
No.
Nope. It's got a pre-comp. All right. So now if we play it back, you can see there's a little bit of rotation happening.
Yeah.
It's a bit extra. And also, actually, while we're here, we're going to change the color of this face layer because it's getting lost in the gray. So we're going to add a fill effect over here and just type that into our effects panel, click fill, and that just is like a color overlay to whatever that layer that is. Right. And same with our liquid. We're going to change that color to black as well now. All right. So now we've got this the liquid rotating a little bit extra, but we want to offset this rotation slightly. So like I said, if you swing some like liquid, like if it's contained in a bottle, it won't stop moving. Even if the container it's in stops moving, it's going to continue on for a little bit longer. So we can simulate that by just dragging these keyframes on our liquid front layer over to the right a bit. And now if we play it back, you can see that the rotation on the liquid continues a little bit after and is a little bit delayed on the actual rotation here.
Right.
Now there is a slight sort of area where it doesn't loop when it gets to the end here and starts at the beginning, because these sort of like handful of frames at the beginning, we've got new keyframe data beforehand, so it's just staying there. So this is why we've got our extra sort of wiggle room on either side. So I'm going to copy these keyframes from the end, paste them at the beginning, and I'm just going to slide these and overlap them.
Okay.
So now, even though it's only looping within these 2 seconds, we've got keyframes outside of that area influencing it.
So it's kind of like movement outside of your timeline that exists, and like
yes.
Okay, cool. I get it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Smart.
There we are. And now, one thing to make it just a little more liquidy is we're going to add the wave warp effect. So I'm going to type wave warp in here, and you'll see it'll start working as soon as we add it. And we've got some waves happening. Now you can see it's not exactly what we want at the moment, although it does give like a cool sort of ghosty sort of pattern, sort of slithering along.
So clients wouldn't be happy with this?
Well, depends on the client. If you're good enough, you can tell the client this is exactly what they need. Like, no, everyone will love it. They want it like this. Okay, so to fix that, we're going to move the wave warp above the set matte effect. So now it means it's waving the animation and then it's using the matte to restrict it to that circle shape.
Right.
Whereas before it was waving it after it had been matted. So for our wave warp here, let's play back. And it's kind of doing what we want at the moment, but here we've got lots of little waves. So we want to make those bigger. So let's change the height to 50. And let's just change the width to something enormous. Let's drag that along. Maybe 250? That seems about right. I kind of like to have sort of one wave visible inside at the moment. Mm-hmm. And let's play it back. All right, and you'll notice it's After Effects is starting to chug a little bit here because we've got a few effects happening. Wave warp in particular is pretty resource intensive. So we're just going to drop down the resolution to half, and it should play back fine.
Okay.
And now
so that's just dropping the resolution in the preview so that your GPU doesn't have to do as much kind of calculating?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
That's right. And for this type of animation, you can drop it down really low, and you're not really going to notice a difference if it's just shape layers. There we are. So now we've got a bit of liquid animation. This isn't how the liquid would necessarily react in real life, because when you sort of get to the top of this sort of arc, that's probably when the liquid would thrash around. So this isn't 100% true to life. But for a stylized little spooky potion thing, I think it sells it enough that like, hey, just a little reminder, hey, this is liquid. It's sort of warping a bit.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it's having a party in that flask at the moment.
Yeah, it certainly does. And so now we're going to add another liquid layer. So we're going to duplicate liquid front, and we're going to call this liquid back. and we're going to drop that below the liquid front, and we're going to color that orange. So I'm just clicking the fill up here, and I'm just going to select the eyedropper and eyedrop the orange from the cork.
Okay. So last time you actually applied an effect to this, is it because there's already an effect applied to this because you duplicated the layer?
We could, not necessarily, we could apply that same effect here. We could apply a fill effect, and it would have the same result. They're just two different ways to go about it. Yeah. So I just chose to go about it this way for now, but there's no particular reason. Has no real benefit in this scenario.
Okay.
So now I'm going to nudge this up a little bit so you can see it picking out the top. Now, at the moment, it kind of looks like there's like sort of like the a sort of film on top of the liquid, like it's like the head of a beer or something, like a Guinness. So that's an effect. If you wanted to get that effect, that's all you need to do for this. Or you could apply a thick stroke to maybe one of these layers as well. But I'm just moving it up so it's visible through the top, and I'm going to change the phase of the waves warp here to offset the shape of the warping, or where the warp happens. So if I drag this along, you'll see what I mean. It just moves the warping a little bit back and forward.
Right.
So I'm going to put it at, I think, 90 degrees, which should make it, I think, the exact opposite. And now if I play it back, they're just going to warp in the opposite way, and it gives the illusion that that's the liquid from the rear of the flask coming through. There we are.
On that topic of kind of your computer chugging a little bit, JB asks, do you use another machine at home for heavier rendering needs?
Yes, I do. This is my portable machine. I very rarely use this.
So you don't normally work on that yet?
I don't. I've got a PC at home that I built at the beginning of the last year when I went freelance, and I've got two big 4K monitors to Cintiq, and I've got like more RAM than anyone could ever need. You need a big machine, and I'm mainly doing 2D animation, so it's not that, I don't need that much of an intense machine. People doing 3D will need like hardcore GPUs and like multi-threaded CPUs. Yeah. I just, for 2D animation, you need, lots of RAM and, a decent single-threaded CPU.
Okay.
Yes, I use a different machine at home. All right. Now, I think that's pretty much most of our animation done. We are going to add a little bit of secondary animation to the face as well. So we're going to do that with our position. So we're going to drag P over here, and at the front, let's drag that so it's exactly at the front. And we're just going to nudge the face over to the left. Again, we're just sort of exaggerating the existing motion of the flask. Just going to drag it up to the right. You can nudge with the keyframes or drag with the mouse or trackpad as well. And I'm going to copy this keyframe from the beginning and paste at the end. I'm going to ease those and adjust in speed graph here. So this is where ease copy is very handy. So I can just copy them from the other keyframes. And now if we play back, we can see sort of the face is sort of looking left to right, and there's a bit of sort of parallax going on there. And we're gonna, instead of dragging these a bit further behind, like we did with the liquid front, that would delay that motion, we're gonna move these a bit ahead. So the face is gonna animate slightly before the flask animates, as if it's sort of driving, like it's looking as determining where the swinging is gonna happen.
Cool.
So if we play that back, you can see it's very slight and very subtle, but the face is sort of driving that.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna copy those keyframes from the beginning, and yes, and then we can paste them at the end here, and that should loop. All right, there we are. Now, so that's
awesome.
Thank you. So that's and that's all. Like, there's position and rotation are the only things being animated here, other than the wave warp effect, really. So yeah, you don't need all the fancy effects, but wave warp is handy. That comes in handy a lot. Liquid flags, it's perfect for. You open that effect, I'm never going to need a hand animator flag again. This solves all my problems.
Get people who's like, oh, that's cheating. You should do like frame by frame animation.
No. People who, not by anyone who does frame by frame animation, because they'll be like, oh, I don't want to do frame by frame. That's so tedious. Okay. I wish there were effects that would, simulate it. But most of the time, like nothing could really simulate frame by frame animation, exactly, because there's a hand sort of drawn charm and stuff like that. Like, things can automate it and help it, and normally if you're doing frame by frame animation, you want as much of that as possible to help you, because it is such a laborious process, although it has a great result. The downside is it just takes a lot of time and a lot of man hours. And that's not where the artistry comes
And if
from.
a client wants to make a change, it's like, cool, I mean, just draw another 500 drawings all over again.
A lot of times, clients will want something that looks cell animated. So a lot of the projects that I'm working on at the moment and worked on in the past is like, how do we mimic that look? Like, what are some things we can do to make it look a bit more hand-drawn?
Right.
And that's actually, we're going to use a few of those now when we go into adding our shading and effects as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add shading. So we're going to shade the liquid first. So I'm going to duplicate this liquid front layer with Command D, and I'm going to call that liquid front dash shading. And let's color that orange. The color doesn't really matter at all, as long as it's sort of internally consistent within your own project. Oh, I've called that shading. Got to get my spelling on point. Shading. All right. And now we're going to change the color of this layer to orange, because I'm going to have orange shading on the black layers and black shading on the orange layers to add some contrast. So I'm going to color that orange, and I'm going to add a mask to create our shading layer. So I'm going to grab a pen tool, and at default, up here, it's selected Tool Create Shape. But next to that is Tool Creates Mask. So if we were to draw it straight like this and draw an extra triangle, oh, well, you can't see it because it's got that matte, but now we just have an extra shape. And we don't want an extra shape, we want a mask. So make sure you click this. It took me years before I figured out this option existed, and I was very happy when I found out. So now I'm just going to draw a shape that kind of sort of hugs the side. Oh, excuse me.
So you only need to worry about like the inside of the flask here. Whatever happens on the outside, because you've got the matte, is just whatever. Yeah,
this is just a garbage sort of drawing over here that has no effect. And so we've got this little edge here, and if we play it back, it's still got the wave warp effect happening on it, but I kind of don't mind it, because I think it makes it look a little more magical, and light doesn't always reflect on liquid in a sort of a straight sort of forward fashion. So you got a bit of randomization in there, kind of helps here. So, and we want that to be a bit of a smooth gradient. So I'm going to press F, which brings up the mask feather property, and I'm going to just drag this over a little, and you can see it's sort of feathering the edges here.
Yeah.
We're going to set it, I think about 60 pixels is right. And from here we can adjust the shape of this mask and sort of bring it in if you need it tighter. And so we've got a little bit of a, nice feathered gradient happening here. Now, we're also going to apply, I want it to look sort of gritty and grainier. I don't want it to be just a flat, flat gradient. So I'm going to choose the blending mode from, I'm going to change it from normal to dissolve. Now at the moment, we're going to get this pixely mash happening here. Now we are on a half res, which is going to make it look a lot worse. So if we go to full res, you can see it's a lot smoother. But when we go in, you can see it's very sort of pixel perfect. It's either black or it's orange. There's no in between, and it's sort of calculating this based on computer math and algorithm and all that stuff to figure out how to make it as smooth as possible. But it still looks, I don't know, I kind of think it looks a bit rough and very similar to like the spray paint tool in Microsoft Paint, like how before we knew how to do gradients properly in software, it was always like this type of thing happening. But we're going to apply some effects that's going to sort of mash that up a little bit more and make it look a little more less digital. And then I'm going to just apply the same sort of thing to layer back as well, and just create a new shading layer for that.
While you're doing that, we got CY asking what specification of Mac would you suggest to do animation with? Like, so what are kind of like the tech spec settings that you would base recommend?
Really, this is a 2013 MacBook Pro.
Right.
So, and it's handling this fine. I don't think this has an awful lot of stuff happening under the hood. Let's have a look. I think we've got 16 gigs of RAM, which is decent. I reckon that's your base. You want 16 at least. I think I've got 64 at home, but RAM's really expensive at the moment, so I can get 32 and upgrade later.
Yep.
If you're building a PC. For a Mac, you don't need to worry about that. I reckon, buy a MacBook Pro should be fine. An iMac, the decent ones. Most of the base level ones are going to have, sufficient enough to do main things. If you really want to get into 3D stuff, or really intense things, maybe look at a Mac Pro, iMac Pro. They can be very expensive. PCs you can always build them to your own specs. But I'm no expert by any means. So,
but if you want to go Super Saiyan 3, then it's probably a PC.
Oh yes, for sure. Right. If you want to go Super Saiyan 3, absolutely. Alright, let's change this to orange, and let's draw another mask across here. This one I don't care at all. I'm even going outside of the canvas, because this one is covered not only by the matte but by this front liquid as well.
Okay.
Let's change that color to black. set the feather to 60, and the the blending mode to dissolve. And so now if we play that back, we've kind of got a little sort of inverse sort of checkerboarding kind of effect happening as well here. We're back on full res. Let's drop that to half. So
we've got also, Taha A says, Ben, why didn't you use inner shadow to create the shading on the liquid?
In a shadow, you can do that. I find working with masks, it's just a little more. I find it a lot more intuitive. Like if I want to change the shape, so in a shadow, it kind of works a bit like a bevel and emboss. Like it takes the edges and moves it.
It's like a layer style in Photoshop.
Very similar to that. Like you can manipulate it a bit further, but I never find I get the look I want from here. Like in here, I can change the feathering of. You can even change the feathering of part of a mask and not the other. As well, and you can change the mask, you can animate the mask as well. You just got a little more versatility, but that can achieve a similar effect. And we're also going to add a shading layer to the cork as well. So to do that, we're going to duplicate cork dash shading, and let's color that orange too. And you're gonna, when we draw a mask on this layer, let's color that black. And when we draw a mask on this layer, because we've already got a mask on it, there's going to be a little bit of confusion that we're going to have to sort out. So I'm going to draw the mask on here, and instead of selecting half of this object, it's selected this part here. So if we go into our masks, we can see that our cork shading layer it's a black trapezoid shape, and then we've got mask 1, which is subtracting this block from the middle, and then we've got mask 2, which is adding this other rectangle on top. So we're undoing that. So if we just set that to subtract, that's just going to remove that area as well. So subtracting this middle part and subtracting this right part. So now we've got a divide in our layer. So on mask 2, we're going to press F, and I'm going to feather that mask. And there we get our shading. And now we're going to select dissolve. And now we've got shading on all of our parts here. And maybe I might adjust that a little bit. There we are. All right. So now that our shading done, I want to add a few effects that are going to, try to disguise that dissolve a little bit more, because I still don't quite love the effect that it's got here. So let's go to full res, and I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. So you can do that with layer, new adjustment layer, or Command Shift Y, Command Option Y, I think. And there we're going to rename that. Let's just call that effects for now.
Would you mostly use shortcuts rather than the menus?
I use shortcuts. I think don't try to learn all the shortcuts at once, because you'll end up not using some. Yeah. But if you try to learn one a week, one a day, you'll find there's some that you just use all the time.
Yeah.
If there's a process you're repeating a lot, most chances there's a shortcut, and you can probably in most Adobe software you can add shortcuts as well. I've got a few custom shortcuts I use in Photoshop and Illustrator for rotating the canvas and flipping stuff. Yeah. But not for. In After Effects, most of the shortcuts you need are already built in. Yeah, it's the things you need and use most often, right? They're the things that you program into your brain. I've heard someone say, if you do something more than three times, you should automate it. Yeah. And most times you can create a Photoshop action or a shortcut, and that'll help you out. All right, so this effects layer. So this is an adjustment layer, and this works pretty much how an adjustment layer works in Photoshop. It's a blank layer. See, at the moment it's not doing anything. You can apply effects to, and that will affect everything underneath it. So instead of applying that effect to every single layer, you apply it to this top adjustment layer, and that will affect everything. You can adjust it from there. So let's add the effect Turbulent Displace. Now when we click on this, we're going to see some crazy warping happening. Now if we play this back, you can see, let's drop this all the way down to 1/3. You can see some crazy warping happening. Now this is kind of like, I think, how every video game shows your character being drunk. They apply this this layer to the top of everything, so it just sort of warps and pulses everything, which can create some cool sort of psychedelic effects. But if we reduce the size, you can see it gets quite small. And if you get it really small, let's go to 5 pixels.
It looks like that dream transition.
Oh yeah, it does look a bit like
Seinfeld, that. Like flashback.
Yeah, you can have flashback. But if you start to reduce the size, you get these smaller bumps. And if you go right down to 2, we get the look that, maybe this was drawn. This isn't a sharp vector line. It's like in Illustrator, you might have a roughen edges. This kind of adds a little more detail and grit. So maybe this was drawn with a pencil or a stick of charcoal or graphite.
So it adds a bit of agitation to the line a little bit.
Absolutely. And we're gonna, I use this on most of my most of my designs, because in After Effects, I'm typically working with largely digital assets and trying to disguise them to make them look as hand-drawn as possible. So, because I just want to...
It's that whole conundrum, isn't it? You're working digital to make it look like you're not.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to reduce the amount down to 30, and we're going to put the complexity up to 5. So now we get a pretty sort of nice looking rough edge that, could pass as, something, drawn by hand, or at least with a roughened edge of sorts. And the benefit is this layer here, if we turn it off with these gradients, it goes from being 100% black to 100% orange to kind of smearing them all over by about 2 pixels. So now it kind of looks like it's a bit more of a smudge, like it's kind of loosely stippled maybe, or something like, more hand drawn. There we are. But that is also very render intensive, because not only is it calculating all the position of all the pixels underneath based on the animation, it's then calculating every single pixel in the animation just so it can smear it 2 pixels offset.
Okay.
So that will make your machine,
Hence why you need a bit of a beast.
Yeah, you need a bit of a beast. So we can drop that down to... We can leave it full for now, because it's, it's done most of the thinking.
How did you find all this stuff out over time, practice, YouTube tutorials, people telling you?
Pretty much, yeah. I went to school for design. I went to UNSW here in Sydney, but all After Effects and motion design I learned from either online tutorials or or more recently sort of working with people in the industry. But yeah, pretty much just piece by piece over years and years, and trying to solve things out. Like this grain effect, this is my own particular patent branded method of how to get this grain effect, because I used to see it a bit and I'm like, I want to get a cool grain effect, and there was lots of tutorials online and plugins you could get, lots using that in a shadow. I'm like, it's not right, not quite how I want it, and this is the best I can do at the moment. I have a few other methods, but this is probably the quickest and easiest one to get it looking like that.
It's interesting because everybody who comes onto the show in one way or another talks about this kind of, it's like, I do the thing that works for me. It might not be the quote unquote correct way of doing it, but it's the way that works, and therefore it's right for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's super interesting. I think for a lot of people to realize is just like, this is how I do it. It just like, you do it another way, that's fine, but this is how I do it.
Yeah, there's no sort of industry standard way to get
no, you shouldn't be doing it that way.
Yeah, most of the projects we're on, even if we're on a team, you got all this software, use the tools that that you can use best, that are gonna work well in this pipeline to create the result. It doesn't matter how no one I don't say no one cares about the process, but the result is that's the main thing. How you get there, client doesn't really care. They want a good result.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's important to love the process and share the process and all those things, and that's I think the most interesting part about the animation. But how you get it doesn't matter. But if the result kind of has to speak for itself.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to add one more effect called Posterize Time. Now this is very much a taste sort of effect. I'm going to what Posterize Time does is it sort of sets the frame rate for the animation. So I'm going to set this to 12.5, which is half of my composition's frame rate. 25 frames per second is the standard in Australia. I think a lot of countries that use PAL. But if you can use 24, if it comes 24 frames per second, you can use 12, and you can even use 12 here. It's going to be the same. Right. But what this is going to do is it's going to make make the whole animation look like a little choppier. So it's going to remove every other frame and just play that one frame twice. And that's traditionally animation used to be done. I mean, still is pardon me, frame by frame on 2s. So they draw one frame and that'll be visible for. They draw one picture and that's visible for 2 frames, mainly because that cuts the workload in half.
Yep.
It's necessary if there's a fast motion, like the character's sort of running and sort of staggering and moving their hands really fast. You might have to animate that on 1s with a higher frame rate. But this sort of mimics a more traditional handmade animation. So if you look now, it looks a little bit sort of choppier. If I remove that effect and play it, it just plays smoother, so you can see things really crisply. These are video games, and if you watch sports, they'll protect it at a high frame rate, so you can see lots of details. But I like to sort of reduce it a bit to make it look a little more sort of.
It looks a little bit like film.
Yeah, a little bit old-fashioned, because you see some films protected at a higher frame rate at 48 frames per second. You're like, this looks like soap operas.
Real. Yeah.
If you don't turn your motion smoothing off on your TV.
Agree. Yeah.
But some animation, perfect. I love a smooth, 30, 60 frames per second animation, or in video games it works nicely. But for most of my, reasons and jobs. I like it, I like it a bit old school.
Cool, that's looking really good.
Thank you very much. All right, now there's one more effect we can add, which is we're going to add a texture. So I've got a video file, which is a light texture here. So if I open that up, you can see it play here. And this is essentially just a really sort of rough piece of texture. This is a piece of paper I painted black, and then I've just got this sort of looping 4 times and rendered that out. And because I use this a lot, I've just rendered it out as a movie file that I can drop into any of my
So you made
animations. Yes.
So that literally from scratch.
That was a piece of paper I owned, and in 2013, because it's got the date imported, the file is called something like scan_002. Because back then I didn't label my files. But yeah, so I'm going to drag this on top, and we're going to make this loop. And so to do that, because it's only a few frames long, to make it loop, in After Effects you can right-click, go to time, enable time remapping, and go to the front here. We'll go to the frame before the very end keyframe. Create a new keyframe. Excuse me. Delete the last one. You can option click the stopwatch. Click this arrow. Click property and click loop out.
Lots of clicks.
As an expression, there's lots of clicks. That is, kind of one of the more efficient ways to loop something in After Effects. Like there's no, click this to loop button. You can also, if you right click your footage and go to interpret footage, main, you can select how many times it loops here. But you can only do that with an imported video file. You couldn't do that with like a composition. If I just scanned in the paper and done them in this comp, I wouldn't have been able to loop them that way. So this is a way that, is useful in more scenarios. So now we've got this looping texture on top, but we can't see anything underneath. So we're going to change the blending mode to screen, which essentially just knocks out all the dark elements and shows only the light areas of this comp are visible.
Yep.
So now if we play that back, we've just got these sort of light, sort of speckly textures, sort of grain dots happening all over our animation, which kind of look a bit like sort of a film grain, film sort of blur, film damage, but also a bit like it's drawn on paper and stuff like that. And here we can also adjust. We can add a curves layer to this effect, and this is exactly how it works in Photoshop. The curves, and you can add a bit of contrast to it if you think it's too light and you want some less texture happening here. You can apply that. And there we've got little animated motion guy, bit of speckly texture.
Yep.
How's it going?
Yeah, cool.
Thank you. We got any more questions?
Yeah, we did actually. A lot of questions about kind of GPU and all that kind of stuff, but we've got Taha also asking, is there any way to get strokes around a pre-comp other than a layer style stroke?
Around a pre-comp? I don't really know. I haven't
Very
really
specific question.
Maybe one method I can do. Let's show you. I'm going to duplicate this comp and let's do a live explanation of what method I use. This is push and blank. I'm just going to duplicate that with Command D. All right, now I'm pressing U on my keyboard to hide all my keyframes as well. So if there's too much stuff happening on your screen, press U, it'll reduce it down.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm just going to select all of our Flask layers, and I'm going to pre-compose that with Command Shift C. Just go to pre-comp. Let's call this Flask. So now that's a pre-comp just to that Flask layer. So if we go in and turn our visibility on, we can see this is just our Flask here. Now, if I was to apply a stroke to this, what I would do is I would duplicate this comp, and on the comp below it, I'm gonna add a fill effect, just so we can see there's a different color. So this would be the stroke color here. Let's make it bright green to be. Actually, no. Let's make it fit in with the scene. Let's make it orange so it matches. And I'm gonna apply the effect simple choker. And what this does is it will sort of choke the alpha channel of that comp, so it will either reduce it or expand it, which is useful for compositing. But so if I drag this... so
it's basically like putting a stroke on an object in Illustrator?
Kind of. What this does is it sort of reduces. Let's see. Let's hide this top comp. So this bottom comp is just, we've got an orange thing here. So if we change the choker, if we can reduce it, which will just crunch in on that object and make it smaller. But we can also, if we check the fill on, we can also make it larger. So that's going to increase the size of it. So once we've got our comp on top, we can increase it, and that's sort of a hack way to, it'll take the alpha channel of that comp and just extend it a bit. It'll only go so far. You can see these edges here. It kind of rounds them off. And once we get even further, it's going to,
just like blur it out.
Yeah, it's just going to blur it out. So it won't be, it's not the best way. The best way to do that is sort of think about it, think about it ahead of time and try to figure out how to maybe get shapes on top of that. But yeah, that's sort of my method that I use for adding strokes for things that, don't have, a stroke property that you can just quickly click.
I like the old hack way of doing it. It's like, this is not what it's intended for, but it works anyways.
Exactly.
We've also got a question about, do you know any good places to get textures or grain from?
Well, I think the best place is to make your own, but that takes time, and you can buy them online. And a lot of the textures I use, I buy online because it's they're really cheap for where you get. Two I use a lot is there's one called Grit Kit, and there's Grit Kit 2, and also Looper Pack. Both of those are available on aescripts.com, and essentially you pay, I think they're maybe $20, and you get like 40 textures, and they're already looping. Most of them you already get an After Effects file that's already organized, so you can just import that in, and you've got all these looping comps of all different textures,
awesome.
like paper, wool, textures, wood, all of those things. And you might think, $20, that's a lot of money, but like if you were to, how much time it would take to even scan those, let alone find the product, the resources, photograph wood, photograph some wool, scanning them, importing them in. That's it saves you a lot of time. So I recommend those.
Cool. So for the value that you get out of it, it's well worth it.
Yeah, I think I know when I was starting, I was like very averse to paying for digital things. And but it doesn't.
I'll just make it myself.
Yeah. And it's not even real. It's just bits and bytes. But it's if I don't buy it, I'm going to spend 8 hours making this, and it's not. Yeah. You got to think of your time as money with those sorts of scenarios. But this texture I made myself, and I use it a lot because I made it for exactly what I needed at that time.
Yeah.
And I found that, now I just always use it because it's always there. And, I made this in 2013. So how many years ago? That's many years, hundreds of years. And you if you add to that, if you add 2 textures, every month, every year for something. After a few years, you got your own library.
Yeah.
And maybe sell that. Maybe in the future, I'll be, selling my own texture packs.
Exactly. $20 a pop.
Yeah, $20. I will send you this JPEG of this texture.
Cool. So we're just about up to time. So where can people find you? Where can people see more of your work?
People can find me online. And they can find me. I have a YouTube channel. On YouTube, just type in Ben Marriott and you'll find me. There I do weekly motion design tutorials and animation tutorials, pretty much like what you've seen today.
Yeah.
But they're normally between 6 and 15 minutes, and they're edited. And I just tackle a different sort of motion topic every week. And then on Instagram, I'm at Ben_Marriott_. Well, post frequently, lots of animations. You know what Instagram is. And then you can look at my website. That's got my show reel and a bit of my portfolio. Some of the more, the better stuff. Instagram and YouTube are the best places.
Cool. Guys, you'll find all these links in the chat right now as well. All that's left to do is thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much for
having me. It's been really
me.
Awesome. I think as an illustrator as well, I'm starting to kind of dabble in motion. So it's probably why I had more questions than reasonable. But thanks for all the questions. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I really hope you guys got something out of it. There will be a live replay of this as well if you guys missed the live. If you go to Adobe APAC.com, you'll see all of the replays of these ones and other ones before that. So thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned. In about 5 minutes, we will have Demis coming on to go through another weekly creative challenge with you guys. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and thank you, Ben, very much.
Thank you very much for having me.